This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And good evening, everybody. Gary Allen with you here on The Express. We've got a great show for you tonight, but before I get to that, I just wanted to offer my piece as far as to all the veterans out there, those that have served long before us from the beginning of the time of this country right up until now, and for those of you that are young enough that will be going in the military, I thank you for your service. God bless you and your dedication, and your honoring all of us, because there is no greater thing that a man can do, and I'm using that in the generic form, than give his life or possibly give his life for his fellow man or his country. There's no greater honor. And to your families, I also salute them too, because they're a very important part of what makes this country move forward. With that said, we have a great show for you tonight. There's some great stuff coming up. Very, very soon, I'm going to be doing a show out of Miami. I'm still going to be living here, but by this time next year, I'll probably actually have moved down to Miami. But I'm going to be doing a show on Sunday afternoons called the Sunday Express from a radio station based in Miami, a great organization called Salem Communications, and I'm really looking forward to all of that. So with that said, that'll be a different kind of a show than what we're doing now, but it will still be a very good show, and I hope all of you will follow me if you can. You'll get all the information when the time comes. And EW, thank you so much for all your work you do on the other side. Tonight, we have a very interesting guest. I try to bring as many interesting people as I possibly can to all of you. But this is a young lady who I've grown to admire a great deal for a number of reasons. Number one, the fact that she is a wife, a mother of three, a grandmother of three, and the fact that she is alive, living, standing, breathing, and helping others to overcome what she had to deal with is unbelievable. She's written an absolutely wonderful book. It is a blunt, right in your face. She talks about mental health and children that are abused, and after they grow up, what happens to them. The book is called The Unspoken Truth. If the Walls Could Speak, What a Tale They Would Tell. It's a memoir by my guest, Miss Lisa Zarcone. Lisa, welcome to The Express.
Oh, hi, Gary. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay, and I also want to add that Lisa is currently the Massachusetts National Ambassador for the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. I wanted to make sure people understood your credentials. As I said to you off the air the other day, a couple of times, how you are managing to survive is beyond me. Now, I've known children that have gone through abuse. I know people who continue to go through abuse. I understand the cycle that sometimes children that have been abused grow up to be adults that abuse their children. They don't know any better. They seek out help, and it's not always available to them. How, in the name of God, as we unveil and unravel this evening, were you able to do so and stand so strong today?
Well, that is a great question. You came right out with it. I love that. But it's, you said it, by the grace of God. From a young time on up, going through abuse, I always had this inner faith and hope that things would get better and change. And, as I grew older and I looked back at what happened to me, I knew that I had to do something with it. I had to take this negative, horrible situation and make something positive out of it. And I felt that was the best way that I could honor myself and my story and what happened to me in a good way. Something good had to come from it, and that's really was my draw and my drive. And I'm understanding.
Yes, you are, and we're going to get into your family, current family, as we move down the road, and into your book as we go down. But now we're going to talk a little bit about what it is that you do. And there is such a stigma on mental illness. And it's a wonderful thing that you're on with me tonight, considering what we have just been through over this last month with the pipe bombs, with the horrible people, with the people being killed in Pittsburgh at the synagogue, people being killed every day for hate crimes. and say what you want. It's all mental illness. People are wound up. People are on the edge, and something pushes them over. I don't know what it is specifically. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. But there is a stigma connected to mental illness, and there's also a stigma connected to child abuse. Henceforth, in your book, you talk about the fact that when you turned around to try to get help, there was nothing. You fell through the cracks, and your family was of no help to you. How many children go through that today, that they turn around and there's nothing there for them? In spite of how the advances we've made to understand it, people still have a stigma about it. They have their head in the sand. Oh, no, that's not going on. No.
Well, it's true, and it's still considered the taboo subject. We say that quite often because it is going on. It's prominent. It's everywhere. It's in your neighborhoods. It's in your schools. It's in your churches. I mean, it is all over, and people still do turn that blind eye against it because I think in many people's mind, when you talk of the stigma, it's like they don't want to take that. It's the reality. This is really happening, and it's so disturbing, I think, to so many people that it's easier to shut it out than to say, yes, this is happening. Yeah. And then when you talk about all these, school shootings and, the synagogue and all these things that have happened in the nightclub in California, do you tack mental illness onto that? And, at times, yes, you can say that because someone who's mentally struggling does have a mental health issue in some respect, but to put the stigma on it to say that everybody who's got this is mentally ill, we should push them away and shun them, that is where the line gets crossed. You think if you've helped people prior to their breaking point, would they have gotten there, And I think that's the big thing about advocating for mental health, because you have to help people before they get to that point.
And unfortunately, we don't always see the signs. I was saying to you the other day that I lost over the weekend a dear friend who committed suicide, and he was in the military. And, we send our young men and women off to serve our country, which is at the top of the program. That's the most noble thing you can do. And they come back from combat situations, and they still have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and they look the same as they did the day they left. But the most delicate organ in the body is what's between your ears.
And the brain.
Yes, and someday I will have one of those. But regardless of whether it's through combat situations with PSD, I always get the letters on.
Yep, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes, disorder. Or it's verbal abuse growing up. The brain takes all of that in, and all you need is one bad situation. My father, my whole life, insisted I would amount to nothing. My whole life. Now, he didn't mean nothing in the sense that I wouldn't accomplish something, but I would never be, what I thought I would be. And all you need is those simple, silly, stupid, ignorant suggestions in your brain. And that's worse than physical abuse or sexual abuse, although you went through all of it, the mental, the physical, and the sexual abuse, as you describe in your book.
But the words hurt the most. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
It's just when you talk about that, you think about, how the child's mind absorbs things, absorbs words, absorbs abuse, or absorbs trauma. The child's mind's like a sponge, but they don't, you don't have the capacity like an adult to truly process it in the right form. So yes, those words hurt and those words stick. And then you get the mindset that, I am nothing. I'm worthless. And as you grow, those words continue to stay with you. And that does bring, it trickles into your adult life, and you're always second guessing. And, those words are damaging, absolutely. And you talk about PTSD. And in the military, I mean, just that alone, people come back from war and they've been traumatized. That's trauma. And that's why the brain, takes in that trauma. It can only hold it for so long, and then it has to seep out somewhere. And this is what happens. It seeps out, and it turns into anger, nightmares, flashbacks, all of those things. And it's debilitating to so many people. And, it's another extension off of when you talk of mental health is finding the right help and working towards, helping yourself heal. It's really a huge process.
In your capacity as going around as the ambassador in the New England area, I would love to hook you up with my brother, Father Greg, who is a priest there in Worcester.
We'll have to meet.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you'll love him, and he's such a kind, and he's an angel in my life. There's no doubt about it. Why is it that we don't have enough professionals to handle the situation? And why is it that, like what happened at Parkland down in Fort Lauderdale, all the right people knew what was going on, but they still didn't communicate with each other? And here we are in 2018, and we haven't learned our lessons on what we need to do to help our citizenship, whether it be a child or an adult, to get over these traumatic moments, or in your particular case, most of the 70s.
Yeah, the 70s were a very silent era, that's for
sure. Well, they weren't much fun for me either, I'll tell you, being where I was, there wasn't much fun for me.
I'll tell you, that's a really, really interesting question that you put out there, because you think about it. How did the system fail? Why is there not enough people out there doing what they're supposed to be doing? You can go to lack of funding, you can go to lack of communication, or that turning the blind eye once again. And a lot of times children get shuffled around. If a child is in a situation where, their home life could be, dysfunctional, and they're acting out in all these different ways, and some of it gets brushed under the carpet. Oh, this child just has this, but it's going to be okay. Let's just move forward. Let's do this. Let's do that. Instead of looking at the real issue here, what is the child dealing with every day in the home? And it always does start with the home life, because the children, what they see and what they learn, it's the everyday in your face. Just like you say in my book, it's right in your face. I did write it in a raw capacity because I wanted people to see that reality.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it is raw. And I tell people all the time, before you read it, I'm just going to tell you right now, it's very raw. I don't hold back. But I did that for a reason. I wanted, the readers, and I wanted people out there to see what a child sees going through abuse right in the moment.
Yeah.
Because
what we're talking about,
your perspective.
Yeah, what we're talking about is the book, The Unspoken Truth, If the Walls Could Speak, What a Tale They Would Tell. It's a memoir of Lisa Zarcone's life. Who's the little girl on the cover?
Isn't that interesting? People ask me all the time if that's me. It's really not me. I when they put the book together, I had a very clear image of what I wanted my cover to look like, what I wanted the little girl to look like, and she's actually a model. But boy, did they really capture what I wanted.
Her eyes are just mesmerizing.
Her eyes are my eyes, and I said that I wanted my eyes, that because my eyes are blue, and as a child, my eyes were such a sky blue, this deep, beautiful blue, and I talk about the eyes that the silent pain that was in those eyes. So that was very important to me to have that on the cover.
You're listening to The Express. Gary Allen with you, my guest, Lisa Zarcone, with her book out, which is called The Unspoken Truth. How can people get a hold of the book? And if people are listening to the program and they want to contact you, how do they do that? You have a website, I know.
I do. My book, you can go, first of all, I'll just tell you my website is lisazarcone.net. If you get onto my website, it has the links to the links to where you can get my book, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's on Kindle. But on my website, it's not just about my book. It shows about my story, but it also has my poetry, and I blog. I have my blog posts are pretty I wouldn't say intense, but pretty informative, and they really touch upon these issues that we're talking about right now, and also self-help things that can get people through, their struggles. So there's a lot there, and you can actually it has my information to contact me. Anybody who wants to email me, it's, lzarcone.net. So, people can, write to me and, reach me that way. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, I'm everywhere, so people can find me very easily. And, most people go to Amazon to get my book because it's the most popular,
well,
link out there.
I will tell you this, that if anybody's out there and they know of or they're involved with someone who has mental illness, whether it be bipolar, which we'll get to in a little bit, or one of the other illnesses that get into your mind and just help destroy you, get this book. It's in your face. It tells you what it's like to go through it, so it may give you some relief knowing that you're not the only one. I mean, that's another part of all of this. I'm sure when you were going through your problems, you kept thinking, am I the only one going through this? Am I the only one? And here's the question, two-part. You were going to school all the time. Your summers were your relief, and then you went, or your terrible time, and then back to school. Didn't the people at school, like today, what is wrong with our school system? Is it just overworked, underpaid, undereducated? Why can't they recognize these problems?
You know, that's interesting. I mean, if you want to take it in two steps, we'll go first back to the 70s, back when I was growing up, back when a lot of us at that time, you know, what happened in the home stayed in the home. And there was always a protocol about parents took care of their children, and whatever issues were happening, it stayed there. You know, there wasn't reporting like we do today. You didn't hear about foster care like we do today. And even therapy and mental illness, all of it, you know, always stayed so silent. So it was interesting because I was the little girl in school who lost her brother. My brother passed away of leukemia. He was older than me. And I was also known as the girl with the sick mom. You know, and that was the extent of it. And that was the extent of, you know, people understanding or giving, offering support or help. It was like you go home, it's taken care of in the home. Now fast forward today. Now we're overloaded with children who have been damaged. And, you know, I believe the school systems and, you know, all these different, you know, what organizations are trying to help the children, but there's still a gap there. There's still a gap where children are falling through. And I think there's just so many damaged children out there that I think that they cannot keep up. And we do need more funding, and we do need more services, and it needs to be addressed at a younger age. I think that's another issue. It gets dragged on so long, so by the time the child does get help, they're in a really deep, dark place, and it's really hard to pull a child back out. Not to say that it can't happen. It can. I'm proof of that. But it's a lot of work, a lot of work.
Is it possible that part of the problem, and by the way, mental illness doesn't know monetary boundaries. This happens to wealthy people, middle-class people, poor people, underprivileged people, you name it. Mental illness is mental illness, no matter how you have it. But is it possible that some of the lack of awareness, as it were, could be from children? As my mother used to say, children are having children, and the children haven't grown up themselves enough to know how to raise children?
Yeah, you know, yes, that's part of it too. I mean, you do see a lot of young people having children, and they're still, like you said, they're children. They're still immature. Their brains have not fully developed, and now here they are raising children. And I've seen this aspect happen many times because I used to work with teen girls in a locked facility, and they were ages 12 to 18. I had girls as young as 13 in my program that were pregnant, 13, 14 years old. Now imagine yourself at that age having a baby. What would you do with that baby? Like, you know what I mean? You don't have that capacity yet. So yeah, that is another problem. And children growing up with child parents are not, you know, maybe not learning the morals and values that need to be taught, and the structure and all those things. And then if they happen to be in some type of an abusive relationship, or if drugs are involved, it changes it all. And of course the child absorbs absolutely everything. So that child is in the middle of dysfunction and chaos. So of course, you know, it's going to cause trauma.
Are there children, people born who are just beyond a sociopath? They're just born bad, and that's it, and there's nothing that can be done about it. I mean, I know your mom at times was not your mom, and I know there was some very scary and awful moments, but are there people that are just born bad? They're just, no matter what you do, no matter what therapy you try to put them under, nothing's going to sink in, that you look behind their eyes and they're dead already?
Yeah, and that's a good question. You know, and I don't like to use the term bad. I feel like someone can be just born sick. And, is that genetics? Is that because, the parent could have been involved in, other things that could have created the child to have issues? Or, once again, some people are just born with mental illness, and if it's not addressed at a young age and worked on through their life, it can turn somebody dark. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see it in the news. We see it in society. We've heard stories over the years, of different things. And you see, mass murderers or, serial killers or all this. Yeah, there is the psychopathic mind. And does that come from a mental illness? Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think some people, many people who are born with mental illness, if it's addressed properly and worked on, and they have proper positive support, and that's another huge thing is, people are not getting the positive and proper support, and they do fall to the wayside. And, I've seen with my own eyes my mom in a manic situation, not on medication. My mom had the strength of 10 men. In that moment of anger and rage, not in control. So yes, I mean it is a reality.
And you also state in your book that at the blink of an eye, your mother was your mother 1 minute, and the next minute she was gone.
Yes, my mother would cycle tremendously. And when you talk about the dark, cold eyes, my mom would get those eyes. The blank stare, the dead look. All of a sudden, where did she go? And as a child, it was quite horrifying to watch your own mother. And, it's interesting because at a young age, I really had a really good perception of my mom changing. And, I would question, and I would be like, wow, like what is happening? And I would study her at times. And it was disturbing. But, yeah, she would switch on the drop of a dime. My mother, cycled quite frequently. And when she would take herself off her medication, she would really go to a deep, dark place. And, the rage and the anger and the hallucinations, it was all of it, the voices, she had it all. Unfortunately, my mother was very ill. And back in that time, they didn't talk about it. They didn't deal with it. It was, she was, shunned in many ways and not supported in good ways. So, of course, my brother and I at a young age, I mean, we were with her all the time, not understanding what was going on with her, just knowing she was different. But no one ever explained to us, that she had a problem or, are you okay? None of that came about. It was always, you just, you went about your days. And it was hard.
Talk about some of the ways that you are helping to break the silence and to bring light on mental illness in all forms, and helping people who have been abused, young people as they grow, to learn to get over it. By the way, I found out something interesting, that Stevie Wonder was a child of abuse. Not so much himself, but his mother.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know that until somebody told me, because I know someone who is very close to Stevie. And he told me, he said, Gary, how he got blind, this is kind of off the track, but how Stevie got blind, he was in an incubator because he was a baby that was born premature, and he got too much oxygen at the time, and that's why he went blind. But he made a promise to his mother that if he ever made any money, he would get his mother away from his father. He never acknowledged his father ever again, but his mother was abused in the marriage, beaten constantly.
Wow.
And Stevie did the right thing. And but talk about how you're helping people to overcome this and helping break the silence with the position you have as an ambassador.
Yes, well, I mean, I can say, first of all, in writing my book, that was a big part of it, not just for healing for myself, but I always knew once I put this book together and got it out there, I wanted to use it as a learning tool and as a helping tool. That was always my mindset. It was, putting my book out there wasn't to hurt other people or hurt family members or anyone or my mother. It was about, raising awareness and trying to, promote healing. So that was the first step, was getting the book together, getting it out there. And then tacking on this, beautiful title that I have, being the Massachusetts Ambassador, and I'm also the regional director for the New England area. and NAASCA is a wonderful organization because we are helping adult survivors. And I do that by, I being on your show tonight. This is one way of doing it. I'm spreading awareness. We're talking about it. And that's the big thing, is not being silent anymore. We're breaking the silence by talking about it. And I go all over. I travel everywhere I can and speak and, and talk with people. But the interesting thing is when people contact me, and they contact me privately, and they'll tell me their story, and I offer them support and help. And I also do it through, my Facebook. I have an inspirational page. People come on every single day just to hear, to see what I write and what what I'm talking about, and they respond. And these are all different ways that we're helping. And, on the NAASCA, our website, we have great, avenues that people can go to. But we also have a blog radio show, and we have survivors that call in, and there's doctors, and there's, police. And we talk about all the issues. And these are all just great ways of connecting with people and giving people a voice. That's a huge one,
Do they think?
Time.
Do they think that they're, as I said earlier in the program, do they think they're alone until they find out, no, there are other people that are abused?
Yes, that's huge. I thought I was alone forever, as a kid growing up. I was, because we were silent. Everything was silent, You walked out the door, you put on your game face, and you went out in the world, and you never spoke of anything. So as all these kids are growing up into adults, and I call them, damaged adults, because there's so many of us. And now that we're all starting to come forward and talk about it, I have had people in their 70s. Now I'm, in my 50s. I've had people in their 70s and even 80s say to me, this is the first time I've ever truly talked about my abuse. I thought I was alone. It's really mind-blowing and profound if you think about that, is that how many people are walking around that still are not talking about it. So by me talking about it and sharing my story and my book and all of it, it helps other people gain the courage and strength to share their stories. And that's when true healing begins, when you are able to say it out loud without falling apart.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to Lisa Zarcone. She's the author of The Unspoken Truth, If the Walls Could Speak, What a Tale They Would Tell. It's a memoir about her struggles with mental illness in her family and being abused as a child, and how she has grown up to be a beautiful woman. And I'm so envious of your husband. It's insane.
Every time you say that, I'm like, thank you so much. You're very kind.
Well, as your former president, I really do. But at any particular rate, do you find that a lot of children who were abused grow up to be abusers?
There are children that have been abused that grow up to be abusers. The young man who sexually abused me, who came into our home and took control of the scene and took control of me, and I was a young girl, I was only 12. He was abused.
Wow.
So, it is a pattern. It's a cycle that we need to break. Many people do grow up, and maybe it's not sexual abuse, but maybe it's the verbal abuse. I mean, we talked about words. Words hurt. So as a verbal abuser, I mean, somebody can take someone down with just their words. They never have to put a hand on. So there are many ways that abuse does get out there. And yes, I again, goes back to, growing up in, being so damaged that if you're not aware of it and not trying to work to heal it, it does come out in those negative forms. Absolutely.
Do you find, you just talked about the fact that you were raped as a young lady.
Yes.
Is child abuse from the adults to children in some cases, not in every case, like rape, it's power more than it is the actual act? Is it I'm the adult and I'm more powerful than you? And why can't people, like tonight I saw in the news where a young lady, she's all of 3 years old, and she's got cancer and she may not make it. And I'll be honest with you, I get tears in my eyes because I say, God, why the children? Why the most innocent of the innocent? Why? And is it a power thing for some adults to have that forceful, I can scream and yell and hit you, power over a child?
Yes, it is a power thing, and that comes down to, somebody who, say if somebody was abused, they never had the control. Now, in turn, they're taking that control and they're empowering themselves by, beating upon the weak. And that's why, yes, many times children do get abused because, not only if someone is ill or, sick, and I did have that with my mom, but the other part of it was my sexual abuser. It was really all about the power. When he came into the house, and I talk about this, obviously quite in depth in my book, and I'm once again I use the word raw.
Yes,
and I'm graphic.
It is.
But the point of that is because, it was about power. He wanted ultimate power. He wanted power over me. He wanted power over the situation, and he enjoyed the torture more than the sexual act. So you're right. It is a lot about control. It's about the ultimate control. That's like the ultimate prize. I was the ultimate prize. He was able to gain total control over me. He took over my life. He took over my home. And he was, in his mind, the ultimate king right there. And that is such a warped perception, but that is the mind of somebody who is not well. Who is not well. Who is
What
sick.
happened? What happened to him?
I don't know. I have to tell you, after I was able to separate myself from him, and we were in high school by then, and he ended up dating a young woman that was also in high school with me, and she would come to school every day with black eyes, black and blues all over her, damaged, beaten, and I had a confrontation with her, and we were young. And I said to her, I says, "You need to get away from him. You need to get away from it." But she was under his control, and all I know is that they went on and had children together, which makes me sick to think about, that he abused me in such a way, and now he has his own children and daughters. And that is the last I ever heard of what happened to them. And we were, and that was at like the end of high school. So you're talking how many years later? I don't know where he is. I don't know what's happened to him. All I can say is I've moved forward from that, but the damage, there will always be that damage there. No matter how much somebody heals, there's always a piece of you that has the scars, and those scars are like little triggers sometimes. So those are the things you work on, but that little piece will never fully go away. But as you heal, you remind yourself that you're okay. You made it. You survived.
Yeah. And I think that's the key word that, every time I do a show like this on a subject matter like this, there's always one word that keeps coming at me. And of course you've survived, but you have to get beyond survival, do you not, in order to have a beautiful life that you have with your husband and your children and your grandchildren? You've got to get beyond the survival part. In other words, when you say to people, well, I'm just living, I'm existing. Well, you want to get beyond the existence. You want to get beyond the survival.
And that's a key piece. Like, for years I could not talk about my abuse. I survived it. I moved forward, and now I'm starting this whole new life with my husband and then having children. But that past will never truly go away, and you can never truly get beyond it until you are able to say the words out loud, until you are able to start to work through it in the healing process. And that's when you thrive. You go beyond just survival. Now you're thriving because you are taking back control. You are taking your life back. You are taking that damage and that abuse, and you're saying, you do not define me, and you have not defeated me. And those are words I used for myself. I would tell myself all the time. A young girl looking in the mirror and being, I'm like a mess. I look dead inside, and and I'm like, I deserve better. And I'm worth it, and I'm worth more than what I have right now. And those were key words that helped me overcome and push forward. And then, fast forward to adult years when I had to really look at all of it, the dirty darkness of it all, and have to, process it. It was very difficult. And then to write it down, it's difficult.
You said to me the other day in a conversation that it took you many years to tell your story to your husband, to which he was astonished, as I am, that you're even normal.
Yeah, normal with a few quirks, but yes, I'm normal.
Oh, all right, okay.
No,
You're all right. You're a New England Patriots fan. I'll give you that. Okay. All right.
I am not. I'm a New York Giants fan.
Well, everybody has a cross to bear. Listen, I'll tell you.
I guess so.
Listen, by the way, speaking of which, I knew Joe Pisarcik really well.
Ooh.
I don't know if he used to hang out at a club I hung out in Fort Lauderdale, so I knew Pisarcik, and I saw him 3 weeks after that fumble, he's never lived it down. He's never lived it down. But and I was around the NFL an awful lot. But no, I thought you'd be a Pats fan because of living where you are. But
growing up in Connecticut, and that's where it's at. But going back to what you said to me about like my family and my husband, yes, I could not get the words out. I could not verbalize my abuse because it was so traumatic to me and so disgusting. I'll use that word disgusting because it was. What was done to me was disgusting. And it would not come out, and it was so buried so deeply. And when I finally was able to release it and to tell my husband, my husband knew, obviously, he knew my mom. He knew my mom's illness. He watched her in action. He's seen the cycling and all that, and he saw her rage. He saw her anger. And, I did tell him that I had, there was my boyfriend, that's what he called himself to me, that I was his girlfriend. He was my boyfriend, but that's not how I saw it. But anyways, when I finally was able to tell my husband that did blow him away because we were together 10 years. And he's like, do I even know you? Like, and he had the right to say that because, he was shocked. I mean, and it is a shocking story. I mean, even to, as I wrote the book and I'm sharing things with him, he kept saying to me, oh my God, Lisa, is there anything else that I need to know? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm done now,
Who's coming around the next corner?
Exactly, because, it is. It's like, you've read the story, imagine being my husband and here we are, we have children together and now he's reading and hearing this stuff and it's like, holy crap, like what in the world, but God bless him because this man loved me enough to stick it out and work through it with me. And that shows you what positive support does for somebody.
Yeah.
He allowed me, in a sense, just to keep going with it as much as it was hurting him and it was hard for him to hear these words. He loved me enough to stick it out with me. And here we are, get married 33 years at the end of this month,
Wow.
It's a long time to be together.
Yes, it is. I lasted 9 years and, I was never so happy to get out of a marriage.
Not all marriages, like, not all made in heaven, but, but we had that true love for one another that was able to sustain us through some of the darkest times. I mean, it was very difficult for both of us for two totally different reasons. Plus, we had a family, and, it's what we always wanted. And we had to find a way to get through it, and we did. And it was hard. It was hard for both of us. But, we're very happy, and we live a good life. It's, we're raising grandchildren. I mean, my husband and I are doing it all over again. So.
Yeah, it happens. With what you do, as you said, with the radio show, I just want to hit on this for a couple of seconds.
Sure.
Children on the street. In many, many cases, they come from abused homes. I remember a particular show. I've mentioned it on this program before. This couple was on with Dr. Phil. He had to practically embarrass them to get them on the show. But this woman's sister had died and left the son to be taken care of by them. After about a year or so, and the young man was about 14 years old, they couldn't take care of him anymore, and they gave him a cell phone and said, we gave you a bus ticket to San Francisco, and Aunt so-and-so that he's never heard of is going to meet you there. Halfway on his way to San Francisco, he gets a phone call. There is no aunt. You're on your own. Sorry, goodbye. Don't ever contact us again.
Oh, my goodness.
Sorry. He turned out to be a pretty decent kid. He pulled himself off the streets in San Francisco, and I forget what happened to him. But Dr. Phil looked at him, and just with such disdain, you could see he wanted to take their head off because he asked both of them, you mean you couldn't have found a way to take care of this young man? Took care of this young man. And the woman looked at Dr. Phil and said, he wasn't my kid. He wasn't my responsibility. She died. Oh, that's the way it is. And the husband looked and said, yeah, he's not my responsibility. And
Wow.
then Dr. Phil brought the young man out later. I think he joined the military or something like that when he got the right age and stuff. And boy, you could see the look on his face when he looked at those two, and they looked at him, and he was 10 times the man both of them ever could be, standing on each other's shoulders. But talk about children of the streets, what you guys are able to do, because there within itself is probably an entire hour of talking about how these kids fall through the cracks, and some of them never survive and they end up dead.
Yes, I mean, that is just such a loaded question all the way around, because children do fall through the cracks for many different reasons. When you talk about that young man's story, which is so horrific and just terrible to think that, imagine his mind. And this is what as you're telling me this is the first thing I'm thinking of. Imagine this young man's mind in that moment on this bus, knowing that nobody cares about him.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. What do you do with that as a 14-year-old or 13-year-old or 15-year-old? It's being alone, and how do you move forward from that? I think of myself as well as a young girl. I felt so alone, and I had nowhere to turn, and what was I supposed to do with all that? You just keep pushing forward. And I think, these teens on the street, yeah, they do turn to drugs and prostitution and all this other awful stuff, and they get scooped up by predators.
Yep.
They're ripe for the picking. So, what we do, as NAASCA, we definitely work more with the adult survivors, but we also have an extension to the children. And there's, again, many, different organizations that can step in and help in getting these children off the street, making that phone call. And that's why I always talk about awareness. Like, you see someone struggling, you see a child out on the street, make phone calls, call different places, these 800 numbers that we have for child safety. And, that's a beginning, that's a start. You have to start somewhere, and you have to start with being aware of what's happening around you in your neighborhood, your communities, all of it. And I think that's another issue, is people don't make the phone calls.
Yeah, they don't. We're talking to Lisa Zarcone. She is the author of The Unspoken Truth, If the Walls Could Speak, What a Tale They Would Tell. It's a memoir of her life as being abused as a child and growing up as an adult, and how she's helping others today. The book is raw. It's in your face. Get it. Go to Amazon. Go to her website, and you will be able to find so much information in this book, and it may help you overcome if you know someone going through this particular problem. Lisa, you talk about pushing change in our society. Do you see change starting to happen little by little by little as people become aware of that this isn't such a big taboo, that frankly, probably if most of us took some sort of a test to see if we were right, we're all screwed up in some form or another. It's just how far it goes. I know I am.
Everyone has a story. You know that.
Hey, look, I work in radio, man. You're not normal if you're working in radio. If you're in show business in general, you're not normal, But I'm being facetious to a certain extent. But the bottom line is everybody's got a quirk. Everybody's got something that, that makes you a little bit different than someone else. This is the Express, Gary Allen with you. Lisa, what changes are you seeing, and laws and local governments that are helping you and your organization to improve situations for mentally ill people and children?
Well, I am seeing changes little by little, as we all come forward one by one and we're speaking and talking about these things. I do see changes. First of all, I can go back to, one way that people can help children when you talk about the young kids and the teens is mentoring. You can be a mentor. You can, you don't have to be in the school system to be a mentor. You can be a mentor in a community situation, and showing kids that there are better ways. There are people who care. As far as, programming, pushing for more programming, getting these kids off the streets, programming after school programming. And, it's not just about sticking them with a basketball or a game of some sort. It's not just about that. It's about, teaching kids about acceptance, about, mutual respect for one another and for themselves, teaching life skills. And these are all programs that I'm slowly seeing come about. And it is a slow process, that is for sure. But I'm seeing more and more of it, teaching, girls about self-worth and young men about self-worth. And, it's a slow process. And as far as government and laws, I mean, that's always an endless battle. But the more people step up and push for change and push for law changes, things are happening. It's just not as quick as we would hope, and you would think at this time, 2019 is coming, it would be more, advanced. But it is a very slow, tedious process. But the more we push and the more we get out there and the more we speak up, you're going to see more change happening. And I am seeing, like I said, again, I live out here. I'm in Springfield, Massachusetts. And just in our area, we have a lot of kids who struggle, but we're seeing more and more programs being put into place, and that is what needs to be done. Kids need to be sucked up at a young age and taught, good things, that they're worth it, and that, they can go far in life. They just need somebody, that one person, to believe in them, and that's where it can start.
It's amazing you were saying about, society and the laws and et cetera. Mental illness, every time there's some sort of a shooting, it's always mental illness is brought up, and then soon it dies. And it's not a glamour disease per se. I mean, it hits the headlines for 2 minutes and then it goes away. What are some of the signs that you see or people should look for, excuse me, in children or adults to say, hey, something's a little off here all of a sudden, and we need to do something about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, with children with abuse, or even with, if they're having, an issue, a struggle, or a mental health problem, always look at change of behavior. I mean, that's the first place to start. You have a child, just, for example, this child's in school, this child's always done well. All of a sudden now this child has become withdrawn, or angry, or mood swings going up and down. You have to take a look at that and say, okay, let's backtrack a little bit and see what's happening behind the scenes. It's being aware. It's aware of those small signs. Like for myself, I was always a very spacey child. I was always like, I was trying to, it's like your body tries to protect you from abuse. So I would go into these I would just fog out for a little bit. And the teachers would always say, oh, she's a daydreamer. She's this, but no, that was me showing them, in a sense, like I'm having an issue here because I'm going with that glazed over look myself. That's another big one, when they get that, someone gets that glazed over look. But then when you talk about the mental health factor, like my mom, growing up, was a very nervous child. She had, she would do very odd rituals and behaviors, and those are huge signs that something is going on. When a child or a young adult's doing something very abnormal and they're doing it over and over again, or, you see these changes, yes, these are signs that you need to ask the questions, and that's a big one. Ask the questions. People are so afraid to ask the questions and get involved. But if we don't step in and get involved, how are others going to get the help they need?
Yeah, there's a part in your book that really I found quite interesting, is when your father informed you something you probably already knew was happening, that your brother had passed. And how he cried. Your grandmother was in hysterical, but your mother was robotic. And her eyes were cold. Is that how sometimes people, I know when my mother and father died, I wasn't robotic. At first I was out of it completely. And then eventually I sort of woke up within seconds and realized what had happened. And I didn't have a chance to mourn for my mother very long because I had to take care of my dad. But people who have bipolar problems, which your mother did, is that their reaction? They kind of go into another space, another dimension?
Well, as you're talking about that moment in my life, I can still visualize that day like it was yesterday. My dad in my lap weeping, my grandmother screaming, and in the other room, such inconsolable, and just my grandfather crying. And yeah, I did notice my mom, because I was always so aware of my mom's behavior. So my brother and I were dealing with my mom prior to his death. So she would get those ways about her because my mom would be all over the place. But that robotic moment when I looked at her and her eyes were dead and cold. And yeah, that was something that she did. It was part of her illness that she would just shut down.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the moment when my dad says to me that your brother is gone and he's weeping in my lap, all I can do was not only just look at him, but then look up at my mom and seeing that expression on her face. And it was a horrifying expression that I could never get rid of.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is part of, you know, mental illness in a sense. And for my mom, it definitely was part of her illness. Now, my mom was not only bipolar, she had the mania, and then she also had what they call schizoaffective. So she would, you know, have schizophrenic behaviors, but she wasn't truly a schizophrenic. She would have the effects of it when she was in her mania state.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would drop into the deep depression. So my mother did it all, and very, very hard to manage. But yeah, the robotic was part of it because there was many times, and I talk about it throughout my story, when my mom tried to kill herself. And I was up all night waiting for her, and when she came home, I was weeping, and I jumped into her arms. I'm like, Mom, thank God you're okay. And here she is standing there with razor marks down her arms and blood, and she's just looking, and she's once again robotic, and she just walks away from me and walks in the other room. So yes, it was definitely, you know, a big part for my mother especially, but I think for many other people who are mentally ill.
You also talk in your book that if you had a word to describe your mother, it was courageous, and I found that quite interesting.
You know, I'll tell you a brief story about my mother. And yeah, my mom, and I shouldn't laugh, but I do laugh because my mom would do all kinds of bizarre and crazy things. And, you know, I would always say to her, Mom, what are you doing? Why would you do such a thing? And I always asked that loaded question. And she would always tell me the same exact thing. Lisa, what do you want from me? I am effing crazy. And she would drop that F-bomb like it was hot, you know. But she would always come out with it all the time. And was she crazy? Yeah, maybe she was crazy. You know, many people called her crazy.
Yeah.
That was the stigma that was placed upon her. But I called her courageous because my mom, she suffered tremendously with her illness. And she was such a fierce warrior, and because she kept fighting that battle, she kept fighting the illness, and she kept trying. And my mom, the true Joanne, had a heart of gold, and she'd give you the shirt off her back in a moment. And she just had such love in her heart, but her mental illness overshadowed it, and she would battle it every single day. So yeah, I called her courageous because she fought it till the day she died.
Yeah. At one point in your book, you talk about the fact that you moved in with your father and his girlfriend, and then eventually she became your stepmother. But that was short-lived. If I remember that part in the book, but and I'm not going to dwell on that too much. We only have about 5 minutes left to go. But you also learned to love Karen, who became your stepmother, and your stepsister. And the three of you made a vow to watch after each other.
We did. And my dad was, you know, it's interesting. My dad was a very interesting man. And he went through his own abuse, traumas. And you know, he was lost for a very long time and did, you know, pull himself together. And him and I did, you know, have a wonderful bond together. We overcame a lot, you know, to get to where we were. And yeah, what my stepmom and my sisters, we vowed to, you know, to take care of one another, and we did form a bond. And, you know, as I was growing up, did I have a lot of anger towards my stepmom? I did, you know, and that was that transferred anger. I was angry with everybody in the world. So she did catch the brunt of some of that. And, you know, unfortunately, it was beyond my control at that time. I was a kid. I was just a really angry kid. But I was able to look at that differently as I grew older and understood her perspectives as well. So, you know, learned process, you know, as you grow, and you could really analyze things in a different way, you know.
Yeah. Talk about you today. You're a mom, a grandmom, a wife, a career woman. What can people take away from this book that you can impart upon anybody listening? And believe me, I want you to go out there to get this book, The Unspoken Truth, If the Walls Could Speak, What a Tale They Would Tell, a memoir by Lisa Zarcone. You can go to Amazon. You can go to her website. and pick all that information up. But what is it you want people out there to get from the book and your life to help them get past just survival?
Many things, but the first thing I would always say is, I want my book to offer other people hope and give them a voice. And I feel like when I wrote this story, that was my main goal. I wanted other people to have the hope like I did and never giving up and always, pushing harder and fighting the battle no matter how awful it is, telling yourself that you deserve better, you can make it, and not just survive, thrive. And that's your win. When you can get up and beyond it and you beat the beast. I call taming the beast is the term that I use, because once you tame the beast, you won. That's your personal victory just for you. You made it past. But that's what I want people to take away from my book, to not only educate yourselves on, what happens behind closed doors and, the awfulness of what child abuse looks like and mental illness, what it looks like when it's not, handled and taken care of properly, but also hope and to know that you can have a voice. So there is so many things that I want people, to learn from my book. And one of my biggest goals as well is getting into colleges. I want our future, teachers and future healthcare workers, doctors, even lawmakers. My story has a lot to offer, but it has a learning tool. But for that person who walks in the store and says, I want to read this book, what I hope is that they get is understanding and hope and a voice.
Well, I am so glad that I've had the opportunity to meet you and get to know a little bit about you. I'm sure my listeners the same. And I want to thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us here on The Express. The book is called The Unspoken Truth. If the Walls Could Speak, What a Tale They Would Tell. It is a memoir about a young lady who dealt with abuse through her teens and has grown into a wonderful part of our society and is out there to try to help people overcome mental illness as well as being an abused child so you don't become an abuser yourself. So I recommend this book by Lisa Zarcone. Please go get it, read it. You'll understand mental illness a little bit better through the eyes of this child. And as I said, the picture on the cover is absolutely mesmerizing by any stretch of the imagination. And it does look a little bit like what you would have looked like when you were young at 6 years old and et cetera. So, Lisa, thank you so much.
Gary, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity and to be able to share my story with everybody. And, I know people will resonate and take something away with this tonight. And, I wish everybody that they can just embrace the journey in life and do wonderful things.
Well, I'm going to try to get you in touch with Greg, for Father Greg, and he has a parish up there, and he also has a lot of friends in different churches and stuff, and maybe that would be a nice beginning point because a lot of people sometimes hide behind other things. But for now, I want to thank you all, and I want to thank all of you out there for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here on The Express. Back next week with another show, and please take care of everybody during the week, and until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.